Hi, I'm Paule Pachter, the President and CEO of Long Island Cares, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Bread, our YouTube program in which we look at important issues pertaining to our organization, but also to other organizations here within the nonprofit space on Long Island. Our program is brought to you by CardWorks. CardWorks is one of the largest managers and servicers of credit card and installment loan products. So if you have a need, if you're processing credit cards, get in touch with CardWorks, cardworks.com, and we thank them so much for their support of this program. My guest today is someone who I work very closely with and just gets so much accomplished. That's our Vice President for Government Relations and Advocacy, Michael Haynes. Mike, welcome to Breaking Bread again.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So I wanted you to come do the program because we just issued our 2023 Legislative Priorities Agenda. So every year, you and your staff and myself work very hard at putting together what we believe are priorities for our elected officials to look at and, of course, introduce and pass in the houses that they work in. And it's on the federal level, the state level, the regional level, of course. So let's talk about our 2023 Legislative Priorities Agenda. What's number one on your mind?
On the federal level, the main thing that we're hoping for, along with Feeding America and Feeding New York State, is that Congress passes a fair and responsive farm bill. A farm bill which strengthens TEFAP, which we administer for the Long Island region, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which accounts for, it's our largest source of food, and in any given year it accounts for between 4 and 6 million pounds of federal commodities. So
What's your understanding? I know one of the big issues in Washington right now in the Congress is passage of the federal farm bill. And in the farm bill, that's where the money for TEFAP is. That's where the money for SNAP entitlements are. And yet we have a pretty significant divide in Congress in terms of how this is going to get done. Are you optimistic that it's going to happen this year?
I believe a farm bill will be passed this year. Based on the intel we got from Feeding America's government relations team, I think it's going to get done. But, you know, if we're thinking it might get done in a month or two, it might be more like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing, in relationship to the farm bill, potential cuts in the SNAP program. We're also hearing a lot of speculation in Washington about the debt ceiling and potential cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. What are you hearing about any cuts regarding SNAP?
Well, one cut, which is definitely happening, at the end of this month, the SNAP emergency allotments expire. So starting in March, everyone that's receiving SNAP will be receiving less, because to be responsive during COVID, the federal government increased the amount of SNAP benefits to fight food insecurity. And, food insecurity went through the roof during COVID for a wide variety of reasons. The economy was reeling, people were furloughed, people had to stay home in quarantine. So they increased the amount of the benefits per family. And that was a temporary thing. It's over now. So, families are going to be seeing a significant cut. I want to say it's between $80 and $120 a month, depending on family size, depending on the constitution of the family. But, that's a lot of groceries that families are used to getting that they won't be able to get.
So what's your concern? We're talking about, at least on Long Island, tens of thousands of families who might have received these emergency SNAP benefits. They had them for the entire 2 years or a little more than 2 years during COVID?
I want to say it was during one of the stimuluses that passed. Yeah, the last 2 years.
Okay, so they had these enhanced benefits for 2 years. Now they're going to lose them. What do you think that's going to mean to food banks, to food pantries, and other emergency providers? You see the numbers of people going up now because they got a reduction in their SNAP?
Well, in one of your most recent pieces, you noted that demand for service at our satellites has increased by about 60%.
Yeah.
That's usually indicative of our entire agency network. And that's just due to inflation and the rising costs of everything. When you take the federal benefits and you lower them, I don't know how we're going to be able to keep pace because it's going to increase demand.
And then on top of increasing demand because people are losing their temporary emergency SNAP program, which, as you said, could be $880 a month, could be $100 a month. We don't know. It depends on the size of your family. Then we take a look at New York State, where there doesn't seem to be any action other than to reduce funding for hunger assistance at the tune of about $22 million. To me, that's a perfect storm coming our way in terms of serving people who are food insecure. So let's talk about the state budget and what your concerns are there.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head there. To decrease HIPNAP during this time is really going to make food insecure Long Islanders and New Yorkers even more food insecure. And we're also disappointed that the program which gives us funding to support local producers in the state, which we've used not just to support farmers, but also to support Long Island fishers, Nourish New York, is flat funded, which when food costs are going up 11%, being flat funded feels like a cut. I know it's not a cut, it still feels like it. So it's a challenging time, but we are, we're seeing some leaders emerge. Mm-hmm. One of our senators on Long Island, Senator Thomas, is championing a letter, and he's encouraging the other senators to sign on to increase HIPNAP funding and to also strengthen Nourish New York. A couple Long Island senators have signed on as well, and we're hoping a couple more do by the end of business today.
So the Senate and the Assembly each have an opportunity to make recommendations to the governor's proposed budget. And right now, there seems to be a movement underfoot that we're looking to put the $22 million back and add, is it another $25 million for the Nourish New York program that we're looking for?
Yes, we're hoping it goes from $50 million in the previous budget to $75 million in this one.
And those dollars actually are supporting, as you said, New York State farmers, including farmers on Long Island, and as we've been doing for the last 3 years, the fishing industry on Long Island. And all that food that we procure from Nourish New York, or the fish that we procure, that's going to feed 230,000 Long Islanders. So what do you see coming down if these dollars are not put back in the budget?
What I see is food banks like Long Island Cares having to find other ways to get the resources that we need. And it's going to be challenging because, during COVID, we went from 275,000 food insecure people to nearly 400,000?
Yeah.
If 230,000 becomes 300,000, we're going to have to, do what we do, be innovative, build other relationships, get private Long Islanders and different businesses to support us, because federal benefits being cut, state programs being cut, we need help, and our lines are getting longer.
As you mentioned, a reduction of $22 million in the HIPNAP program. We're looking for $25 million more for Nourish New York to help out farmers. I don't know that the average Long Islander realizes what it takes to feed the hungry on Long Island. That's why it's important for me and you right now to take a walk in the warehouse so people can see it. So if we don't get a farm bill, if we don't get additional federal funding, a lot of the food that's standing here in the warehouse, because this is all the government commodities, this is going to go away. And I don't think people understand how important it is for us as an organization to provide fresh produce to people, to provide things like infant formula to people, even though that's not a government commodity, but the cereal and the shelf-stabilized milk and everything else, this is going to really be a drain on our resources if they don't continue to support it.
And after it was cut 40% last year, we can't afford 2 years like that.
Absolutely. And therein lies the challenges for most food banks today. And that is, how are you going to keep food in your warehouses and keep your warehouses full so you could feed everyone that needs the food? The interesting thing is, unemployment is less than 4% right now. And I'm sure that there are people that believe that, well, if unemployment is so low and we're creating all these, tens of thousands of jobs, why aren't these people on SNAP going to work? And they should be able to manage their families and purchase their food. But not everyone that comes to a food pantry is eligible for the SNAP program. And we see a lot of seniors who are struggling here on Long Island to make ends meet. They are not SNAP eligible, many of them. And now with Nourish New York, flat funded as you called it, and the HIPNAP budget losing $22 million, I think you're 100% right. We're going to see the lines increase. And, we are hearing between 40 and 60% new people coming to the pantries and the other programs. So you think we have a good chance on a state level to make a difference this year?
I want to be optimistic, but I'm not sure. I didn't know, last year in terms of advocacy, we pushed hard for an additional $22 million. And we had some momentum, but I didn't know if it was going to be added. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being added, and we were able to do great things. We were able to get out more food, give agencies more grants, really do some innovative things. I was optimistic, but I wasn't sure. This year, I'm a little less optimistic, to be honest with you. But, we're still fighting. We're still making calls. We're still writing letters. We have Long Island Assembly members and Long Island senators stepping up. We appreciate Senator Thomas, Assemblyman McDonough, Assembly members Salitti, Thiel, Senator Weick, Senator Martins is authoring his own letter. So whether or not they do it collaboratively together on one team letter, we still have people individually reaching out to Senate and Assembly leadership and the governor saying that, hey, cuts might need to be made, but not when it comes at the expense of our state's hungry people.
And I think it's important for people to know that we do have bipartisan elected officials in New York State, in the Assembly and the Senate, who are interested in this issue, very concerned about their constituents who are facing food insecurity. They know who their constituents are because on an annual basis, you provide them with data, the number of organizations that provide emergency food in their district, and the number of people that have been visiting those organizations. There's another issue that seems to be top of mind for a lot of people in the food bank space, and that's school meals. There seems to be a movement afoot in New York State to continue funding for these programs. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we're proud to stand with Feeding New York State, Hunger Solutions, Health and Welfare Council in calling for school breakfast and school lunch to be free. A lot of other countries do it. Other states in the country are doing it. The education, all the health outcomes associated with it are through the roof. You can't expect kids to learn if they're coming to school on an empty stomach. Mm-hmm. And doing this, it's economies of scale. If everyone who's eligible, if everyone becomes eligible and everyone has access to this food, doesn't mean everyone's gonna use it. It just means it's there for everyone. Right. You could still bring lunch. You could still bring a brown paper bag and have your peanut butter and jelly. Well, not peanut butter anymore, but you could have your almond butter and jelly.
There you go.
But it destigmatizes the issue. It brings the cost per pupil down, and it makes it so that our schools are more healthy and thriving communities.
I wonder how many people on Long Island, Mike, understand just how many school districts out of the 224 or 126 that we have, how many of those school districts offer the free or reduced breakfast and lunch program? It's nearly almost all of them, regardless of the community they're located in. So someone would sit back and say, well, yeah, we know that there's issues of food insecurity in the Hempstead School District because we know that there are families on public assistance, but there's also food assistance in the Jericho school system, in the Syosset school system, Belmore Merritt, just keep going. And I think people, I think average people may look at this as this is a handout or a bailout to the school districts when all they're trying to do is make sure that children that are in need of nutritious food receive it. And I don't understand. What do you see as the pushback on this?
I think it really is just these challenging budgetary times. I think people are just going, if you're a working family, one of the things you should prioritize is to pay for your kids' food. I shouldn't have to subsidize it. And, you could start to see both sides, but, when you think about kids being on different lines to receive their meals and kids, you think about things like lunch shaming, then it really starts to put things into perspective. Kids need to eat. Kids don't need a stigma attached to it. Kids need to just be able to go to school and focus on their studies.
And the program is operated in such a way that there is very little stigma associated with this. No one's wearing a badge that says, I get free food from my school. These are children who have a legitimate need because families are still struggling, regardless of unemployment, regardless of whether they're getting paid $15 an hour or $17 an hour, they're still struggling. It's not enough to address all of your needs in Nassau and Suffolk County. I think we touched on some very important issues right here. Unfortunately, we only have about a minute left, so we can't get into the local issues, but certainly we'll have you back, or we'll do a podcast about this moving forward. Mike Haynes, always a pleasure to have you here because your leadership means so much to Long Island Cares. I want to thank you for watching Breaking Bread today. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the program right there on YouTube. And once again, we want to thank CardWorks for their very generous support in sponsoring this program. Until the next time we break bread at Long Island Cares, this is Paule Pachter. Stay well and stay safe.